What's up, guys? I'm Uncle Freedom, coming to you on a glorious and well-deserved day off. How's it going? First things, y'all, do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe, share. That's how we push out more content. Take a moment, check out my friends at outlastsupply.com. They are a monumental supporter of what I do here. And if you were to, I don't know, search for personal defense, you would probably find what you're hunting for. I'm just saying, it's a thing. It's kind of like going to a speakeasy. You go into the phone booth, you pick up the phone, the door opens on the back side, and you find Shangri-La of good stuff. Go there, check that out. Personal defense, you'll find it. You can find a link to those guys over on my website, violentalgebra.com. I don't sell anything, man. I produce educational content for the masses. Today I'm going to show firearms. All firearms I'm going to show today are going to be clear, and I'm in a safe area of my home, which I maintenance and work on dry fire and firearms. I dry fire down here. Nobody's going to get got through the internet. Today's video is going to be about SIG. Now, I know there's about 1,001 videos on the internet right now about SIG. I have been asked for my take on it numerous times. I have done a SIG video in the past, and I have made mention to some of the things I did not agree with. So the only SIG I have left in my possession is this P320 X carry. This was produced in 2018. It was right after the Romeo 1 dot was released. This came cut for the Romeo 1 dot. You got the dot. And I immediately did not like the fact that to put the dot on, I lost my rear sight. I didn't care for that. I did make use of the chassis system and use a Wilson Combat grip for it. But outside of that, I never really did anything with it. And I did shoot a lot with this. I like this platform. This platform shoots very well. The trigger is very nice. But I always had some problems with it, right? I did not like the fact that the slide wiggles and wobbles as I put pressure on the trigger. I've never liked that. I didn't care for it. And to be honest with you, I never really understood why I should have to spend an additional like 400 bones to put a slide on this thing that allows it to be modern, when the whole point of this was it to be a modular handgun system, and here I am holding like a thrice-baked potato that doesn't taste good, and it doesn't do anything I want it to do. I did a video on this where I called this the bastard child of the SIG lineup. This is the forgotten one. But for all its faults, I still kept it because I had a love-hate relationship with SIG. So starting all the way back into the early 2000s, I carried a SIG P226. I really liked that firearm. I carried it, I liked it. I had a 229. When they got into the AR game, I bought an M400 Tread, which I did not care for. I did not like the way that gun shot, so I got rid of it. But when the 320s were released, I was like, that's really cool. And me being kind of a gun nerd, I'm like, all right, cool. We're going to go check that out. Now, what this did do was it exposed me to the full-size grip with a compact slide kind of philosophy, right? Something that is one of my supreme favorites when we start talking about Glock, and this is my Glock 45 Koa. For those of you that have asked, the review for this is on the way. I am at 2,300 rounds at this point. I have about 1,000 more rounds on the docket, and then we'll be done with this. There will be a full video on YouTube or on Patreon that I have tried to upload 5 times, but it turns out I had a computer issue, which we've now sorted out, on the actual build for this, where I tore it completely down. I did a bunch of stuff, I actually did like an undercut on it and stuff. I show all of that in that video, so if you're curious, it's going to be over there. But I fell in love with that full-size grip, compact slide. But to be honest, and I've said this before, when they started having uncommanded, at first it was the drop safe, right? And I understood because of the mass of the trigger shoe itself, if it landed, that the trigger shoe, because it was lacking a very basic safety feature, and that is the trigger shoe safety or the inertial safety, that it could pull its own trigger if you dropped it. I didn't like that. But when they did the voluntary upgrade, the X frame trigger, which is this, because this was released right about the same time as the X5, the X trigger assembly never was a part of that system. So this has never once been labeled under anything that would be a voluntary upgrade. So I kind of had that part dealt with in my brain. But then a few years ago, we started seeing the first uncommanded discharges of the SIG. Now, my problem with that was using standard law enforcement, your run-of-the-mill cop, as your barometer for good weapons handling is a terrible decision, right? Cops as a whole are pretty bad at firearms handling, firearms manipulation. I know this because I teach cops a lot. and is actually one of the reasons that I started the open range on Sundays in an effort to get cops more training that was free, that wasn't going to burden their agencies, and they would come away from it more proficient and better at what they do. I saw a lot of these being issued in my state. And I don't know, when the first uncommanded discharge and I saw it, I wrote it off to the holster, right? Because agencies are notoriously cheap, and if you tell me that I can sort of kind of fit this in the holster I've already got, I'm going to try. But something about it never sat well, and I don't know what it was. It was kind of one of those things, and I mentioned this not long ago. Something was definitely wrong. What was wrong, I have no idea. To be quite honest with you, I don't think SIG freaking knows. And I think SIG was basically playing the game of how do we not get caught holding the bag for selling millions of these things that are dangerous. And then there was all the stuff about there was these parts that they switched and they were made in India and they were cheaper, and that was what was causing the issue. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know that that is entirely the answer. And I just, like I said, I never had an answer for it. Well, this weekend I was dinking around and I came across the Wyoming Gun Project. And he showed in the Wyoming Gun Project that he could put a minimal amount of input into the trigger of the firearm itself, basically in the take-up range of what you'd be doing to take a shot. And he could manipulate the slide and that would cause it to fire. Now, I've always hated how chintzy this slide fit. It has always bothered me because here's the thing, when you have this, when you actually go to pull this trigger, this slide physically moves. It actually walks up and down. I've never liked that. I've always hated it. And with a red dot on, you can really see it because you're presented out, you're staring at your target, you see your dot, and as you start going through the trigger, the dot moves, and it drives me insane. So needless to say, it was no longer something that I used on the range on a regular basis. I did not conceal carry it. I don't think I concealed carried this in appendix, but about 3 months. I even went as far as getting a Tenacore Caratum Lux for it in an attempt to carry it again, but it never sat well with me. Again, something was definitely wrong. What, I could not tell you, and being that I am not a firearms engineer, I don't know. If you ask me to fix something for you, like this, Fusion Firearms XP Pro with the ported barrel here, I can tear this apart and I can do all kinds of work for you. I can do that in 1911s. I can tear apart Glocks all day long. I can do that, right? For those of you that wonder, the final video on this is inbound, as is this one, because, well, I've been extremely busy. Needless to say, the ported barrel in this thing is just giggle material. So I was no slouch at working on firearms, but I did not engineer them. So I did not know exactly what tolerances were cooked into the system to begin with. But it never sat well with me. When there was like 3 of these that had come out and we had heard about uncommanded discharges, I knew something was wrong. I just did not know what was wrong, but it was enough for me to say, yeah, we're not going to carry that, ever, for any reason. I don't trust this. Which hurt for me to do because as a guy that loved West German P226s, man, it just hurt my soul that I could not carry this, what should have been amazing. Because there were things I didn't like about it, but it did shoot really well. But I didn't trust it anymore. And I didn't trust its ability to go off when I asked it to. I had questions about its viability in a bunch of other situations, right? Because so having a gun static in a holster is one issue, right? But as law enforcement, man, I may be dropped on this thing. I may wrestle around, smash it into doors, and this thing is getting rocked all the time. And it just, the slide moving never sat well with me. We were having uncommanded discharges, and I didn't know what was going on. And again, not a firearms engineer, so anything I say about it is going to be pure speculation at best. And then we started seeing it become more mainstream because it was happening at a high enough rate, or at least being reported that it was just something we knew was happening, right? We had the deal at Achilles Hill Tactical where the gun went off and he freaked out and said, was that 320? We started seeing law enforcement agencies drop them and get new ones, get Glocks and stuff, because they believed enough was wrong that they were willing to spend the money. And then I knew of a few academies and I knew of a few instructors that were starting to look at not allowing them on the range. Now, I'm a firearms instructor, and I am pretty deeply plugged into the firearms instructor world, more so than a lot of people even realize. It's one of those things where it's almost criminal to me. Like when you look at some of these really high level instructors and they have these just minimal like subscriber counts on YouTube. And I'm like, dude, you have no idea who that guy is. Like Paul Sharp coaching, right? Paul Sharp is amazing at this, right? Bill Blowers, Tap Right Tactical, Chuck Haggard, Chuck Pressburg, Press Check Consulting. These are the dudes that I look up to because they are so good at what they do. We're all starting to see the writing on the wall. We know something's wrong. And then we had the incident that took place with the security forces officer at the Air Force Base, where he took it off in its Safariland holster by the QLS, sat it on the desk, and it shot him in the chest and killed him. Now, I have taken a QLS Safariland off with a firearm that was hot in it. I hunt thousands of times and sat it down and switched out guns. So that didn't sit right with me. Something else was wrong. And then I saw Wyoming Gun Project. Now, Wyoming Gun Project was the guy that figured out, like, man, if I take this guy and I put just a little travel in here, it'll go off if I manipulate the slide. That should never happen. That sound you heard was this going off. Now, somebody's going to say, oh, yeah, it's because you get your trigger on there. So for those of you that don't know how this works, we'll explain this, right? So a striker-fired pistol is effectively a double, this is a two-stage trigger, right? So we have take up, which is nothing, and we hit a wall. There is a little bit of mush in almost every striker-fired gun that happens right before it breaks, right? So we should feel slop, nothing, and then we move into the wall, and then it just, there you go, you're there, it's the last tension, it's going to break. I should be able to sit at that last little bit and never have a fear that this thing's going to go off, right? I should just be able to sit here, but knowing that I can touch this and it goes off. So seeing his video, I was like, I got to know, right? So I got mine out. Remember, this trigger assembly has never, ever been a part of any voluntary upgrade. So, and then I have my drywall screw, and I decided I would test this out and I would see. I was like, man, I want to know if that's real, right? Get in there, screw. Guess what it is? And we'll look at that again, shall we? So I'm gonna put the trigger, this in here. Keep in mind, all the screw is doing is holding the trigger into a set position. That is the most unsafe damn thing I've ever seen in my life. And huge shout out to Wyoming Gun Project for figuring that out. Because when I first was doing it, I wasn't using the screw. I was using my finger, right? Like I was holding my finger on it and I was like, okay, there we go. There's the slop. There's the legit wall, right? Like there's the legit wall. Okay, there's the legit wall. All right, legit wall. And then I touched it and it fired. And I was like, oh, did I do that with my finger? And then I realized I still had the rest of the trigger pull. I was like, maybe that's just wrong. And then I was like, all right, so let's see if I just do it with my finger. I'm all the way at the wall. There's nowhere else for that trigger to go. However, if I do this and I just put a little bit on it and it fires, I still have room to move that back. And I was like, oh crap, that I didn't pull the trigger. So I went and dug out a screw because I was like, all right, now I got to know, right? So I took my little screw and I wedged it into here because I was like, oh, I don't want to shoot the frame up. And then I thought about it, I don't really care because I'm never going to carry this again. Because I just proved to myself what has been said to me was BS by SIG this entire time. SIG's been, oh yeah, it's not true, it can't happen, it can't go off without a trigger press, it can't go off without a trigger press. Yeah, it can. And I can replicate it 10 times out of 10. So all that weird slop that was in this slide is what it is. And it makes sense if you think about it, right? So the SIG operates on a fully cocked striker. So that means that the striker is in the most rearward position it can be, and it is hung up on the cruciform that is the trigger bar. Well, here's the thing. That is very little contact between the striker and that, and when you actually pull the trigger comes back and drops out of the way, and the striker goes home. Who's to say that I can't move this slide just a touch? Again, you hear that? And it lifts the rear of this up and it drops out. Turns out that happens, and it happens every time. And I can tell you, knowing now that that is the issue, I fully believe that every one of these unintended discharges that we've ever seen happen, one of these, is that. There may be something contacting that trigger itself, but the fact that it's going off by me touching this slide is the wildest shit I have ever seen. This was an unsafe design from the word go. And I bet a lot of their problems is the fact that they took a design they already had, which was the P250, hence the like hammer channel you see in the back, and they just augmented it to make it fit the requirements for what they were going to do. They won their huge contracts, they got their giant payday, and all of us were left holding the bag. Now, I am sure SIG will get mad. I also don't give a shit. SIG, pay attention to my videos, man. I'm all about truth and fact. Truth and fact is, this is an unsafe firearm. And now that somebody has found out why it's unsafe, I can unequivocally say that I 100% agree with him that this is 100% capable of firing without you fully depressing the trigger. This is 100% capable of going off at a time you don't want it to, without you doing it. This has got to be one of the dumbest damn things I've ever seen in my life. I don't know why it came out like this, but you cannot tell me that SIG does not know that. If Guy in Wyoming, with a screw and a little bit of manipulation, figured out what was going on, and I was able to replicate his test verbatim in my basement in like the first 6 seconds, yep, there's no freaking way you didn't know. So SIG, shame on you for beta testing on people. Shame on you for putting out a defective product that has now claimed lives. This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen. What does that mean for SIG? I don't know, man. I can tell you they don't come back from this. Not in the fashion in which we know SIG. There's no freaking way. Because here's the thing, if Wyoming Gun Project figured this out and I was able to replicate his test in like freaking 10 seconds in my basement today and realize real quick, like, oh shit, this thing goes off all by itself because of the slop in the slide. Guns shouldn't make that noise, man. Like, here's a Glock. You don't hear any of that crap, do you? You know why? Because there's not a whole bunch of freaking slop like there is in this. There's no way SIG didn't know that was the problem. There's no way. I think what happened is SIG knew there was a problem and they realized too late into the game, with too many of them gone and a contract already approved, that they could not go back and actually fix it. That's what I think they did. Do I know for sure? No. Will we ever find out? Also probably no. Because this is going to be tied up in so much litigation and red tape. No. I can tell you, if you're a law enforcement officer and you're issued one of these, start trying to find a way. I will help you. I will write you a needs statement explaining to your agency why you need to be able to carry a different firearm, right? Because here's the reality. 8 out of 10 cops that are issued these are never even going to see this video. But the 2 out of 10 that are constantly training and they take their craft seriously, those guys, send me an email. I will send you validation letters, something for you to take to, or at least give you ammunition to go to your administration and try to get you permission to stop carrying a potential liability and to switch to something that is better. Right? I've done this numerous times because of how my duty pistol is. I've written them for the Ramjet, I've written them for magwells, I've written them for optics, I've written them for iron sights, I've written them for aftermarket triggers, minus connectors. It is doable, and I will help you in any way I can. But needless to say, I will never sell this because I could not live with myself if I sold it and somebody got hurt with me knowing. I'm not going to do the cringy shit of chopping it up either. It's just going to live in a gun safe. And it'll live there forever because I cannot. All of us got hosed, man. You can say what you want, but we all got. Everybody that bought a 320 got. And we should all be pissed about it. We'll see what happens, man. I honestly don't believe SIG ever recovers from this. But for those of you that followed me that asked me immediately if it was possible, yeah, it's 100% possible. Wyoming gun project is dead on the freaking money. There is absolutely zero way that should fire the way it does. And that is the most unsafe handgun I have handled in quite some freaking time. My thoughts go out to that airman's family. I don't know him. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to pray for you. But I do feel bad for you, man. And I feel bad for your family because if he had kids, man, there are kids that are never going to have a dad. And they're not going to have a dad because somebody wanted to line their pockets instead of making sure it worked right. So, guys, I am Uncle Freedom. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. For the love of God, don't carry that thing anymore. So, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Until next time, I'll see you later.